Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into some serious global economics? China just dropped this new economic stimulus package, and it's making some serious waves.
Yeah, it's definitely got everyone talking.
Trying to figure out what it all means, especially for us over here in the U.S.
Right, exactly.
So for this deep dive, we're turning to Finance with Lester on YouTube.
Oh, yeah, I've seen his stuff.
He's got a pretty good take on things.
Yeah, he does.
Even though even he admits there are a lot of unknowns still.
It's true. Predicting the impact of something like this
It's got to be tough.
is like forecasting the weather based on, a butterfly flapping its wings halfway across the globe. But we can break down what we do know.
Yeah.
And maybe even spot some opportunities while we're at it.
Okay, so Lester doesn't have all the fine print on this stimulus package yet. But one thing he emphasizes is that it's focused on Chinese citizens. Real estate seems to be a big piece of the puzzle, too. And the question he keeps coming back to is, will this money stay within China's tightly controlled system? Or are we going to see it flowing outwards?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? To really grasp the potential implications, we need to understand how stimulus packages work in general. It's kind of like injecting capital into the economy, hoping to jumpstart spending and get things moving.
Right, sort of like priming the pump, I guess?
Yeah.
We've tried that here in the U.S.
Yeah.
The debate is always pretty fierce.
Oh, absolutely. Some people will tell you that stimulus measures are a recipe for inflation.
Yeah.
They create these artificial bubbles. Others say that they're essential tools to avoid recession and keep jobs growing. It all comes down to how it's implemented, I think.
The context.
And the unique context of the economy.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to China, some analysts are already waving those red flags.
Oh, yeah.
Saying this whole thing might just be postponing a market crash that's inevitable.
I've heard that, too. China's stock market has been on a roller coaster ride lately, so it's a valid concern.
Right.
But we have to at least acknowledge the counter-argument, too. What if the stimulus actually ignites some serious growth? In China's already enormous economy, could that potential offset the debt they're taking on to make it happen?
See, this is what I find so gripping. It's like watching a high-stakes poker game unfold. And Lester brings up another point that has me hooked. What if Chinese citizens end up with more spending power internationally?
Now, that's a scenario worth exploring. Just imagine the impact if even a fraction of that stimulus money gets invested outside of China.
Whoa. Okay, slow down for a second. My mind's racing.
Yeah.
If that were to happen,
Yeah.
we'd be talking about a complete game changer. Think about what it could mean for U.S. markets, for entrepreneurs looking for investment, especially those who already have connections with Chinese investors.
You're right. It's a chain reaction with potentially massive consequences.
Okay.
That's why we've really got to pay attention to how things play out over the next year and a half. Will this be China's economic miracle or a catalyst for instability? And how will those ripples spread throughout the global economy?
Yeah. It's like we're watching a domino effect in slow motion. Something huge is about to happen, but it's impossible to know exactly how it'll all fall into place. And Lester throws in one final piece of the puzzle that I think deserves a whole deep dive of its own: the impact on cryptocurrencies.
Oh, absolutely. That adds a whole other layer of complexity to the equation.
Especially given China's rather complicated history with crypto.
Yeah. On one hand, they've clamped down hard on Bitcoin mining and trading within their borders.
Right.
But on the other hand, they're actively exploring the potential of their own digital currency.
Right. So how does this new stimulus combined with China's stance on crypto potentially shake things up for Bitcoin and other digital assets?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We've already witnessed how China's actions can send shockwaves through the crypto markets. It's an inherently volatile space, and any significant policy shift from China could trigger a ripple effect that's impossible to ignore.
Yeah, it's almost as if they're trying to control the weather while simultaneously building a boat to ride the waves.
That's a fantastic analogy. It really encapsulates China's approach to the global economic stage. They're determined to be major players, but they also want to maintain tight control within their own system,
It makes it hard to predict.
which makes anticipating their next move incredibly challenging.
And that is precisely why this deep dive is so captivating. We're not just rehashing headlines here. We're delving into the underlying currents shaping the future of global finance.
Precisely. And to do that effectively, we need to engage in some critical thinking about the information we're absorbing. Lester, for instance, acknowledges the uncertainty surrounding the stimulus package right from the start.
Yeah.
He doesn't claim to have all the answers.
Right.
And encourages his viewers to draw their own conclusions.
Okay, I gotta admit, that's a refreshing change of pace, especially in the world of financial commentary where everyone seems to have an unshakable opinion on everything.
It's a crucial reminder that even the most seasoned analysts are working with incomplete information. The economic landscape is constantly evolving with multiple perspectives to consider at every turn.
So as we try to make sense of this whole China situation, what are some of the key questions we should be asking ourselves?
Well, first and foremost, we need to stay informed about the specifics of the stimulus package as they become available. What are the actual mechanisms being used? How's the money being distributed? What are the stated goals and intended outcomes?
Okay, so let's say we get those details. What's next?
Then we need to start connecting the dots. How does this stimulus package fit into China's broader economic strategy? What are their long-term objectives? Are they primarily trying to boost domestic consumption, or is it more about increasing their global influence? Or maybe a bit of both.
And how should we as investors or entrepreneurs interpret these signals?
Yeah. That's where things get a bit trickier, honestly. There's no one-size-fits-all answer. It really depends on your individual circumstances, your tolerance for risk, and your investment goals.
Yeah.
But having a deeper understanding of the forces at play can definitely help you make more informed decisions.
Got it. So it's about being proactive, not just reacting to whatever happens. Instead of blindly following the crowd, we need to do our own homework and think critically about how these global events might impact our own financial strategies.
You nailed it. And that's where a deep dive like this can be so valuable. We're not just skimming the surface, we're taking the time to explore the nuances, consider the potential consequences, both positive and negative.
And since we're talking about potential consequences, I want to circle back to Lester's point about the impact on cryptocurrencies.
Okay.
He seems to think it's a big deal, but doesn't really go into detail about why.
Well, that's where our own knowledge and insights come into play. We need to take Lester's observation as a jumping-off point and then do our own digging. What are some plausible scenarios? How might this stimulus combined with China's existing crypto policies affect the demand for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other digital assets?
You know, this is one of those moments where I wish we had a crystal ball. But in the absence of one, we'll have to rely on our critical thinking skills and our ability to connect the dots.
And those are precisely the skills we're trying to cultivate here. We're not just feeding you information, we're empowering you to become more informed consumers of information.
To think for yourself, challenge assumptions.
Exactly.
And constantly ask, what if?
Exactly. In the constantly shifting world of global economics, that mindset is more valuable than any single piece of data.
So to bring this back to earth, what are some practical takeaways for our listeners? What should they be watching for in the coming months?
I'd say keep a close eye on how the details of the stimulus package are actually implemented.
Okay.
And watch how the Chinese markets react. Are we seeing signs of sustainable growth? Are there any unintended consequences starting to pop up?
And on the crypto front?
Be on the lookout for any shifts in China's regulatory stance towards cryptocurrencies. Any significant changes there could definitely send shockwaves through the market.
So basically, stay informed, stay curious, and don't be afraid to ask tough questions.
Sound advice. And remember, the global economic landscape is dynamic and incredibly complex. There are no easy answers. But by engaging in deep dives like this, we can start to develop a more nuanced understanding of the forces at play.
And hey, who knows? Maybe we'll even spot some opportunities along the way.
Now you're speaking my language. After all, knowledge is power, especially in the world of finance.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the potential upsides and downsides of China's stimulus package, its potential impact on global markets, and the wild card of cryptocurrencies.
And we've highlighted the importance of critical thinking, of looking beyond the headlines, and of understanding the interconnectedness of the global economy.
All right, it's not just about China. It's about how events in one corner of the world can ripple outward, affecting investors, entrepreneurs, and everyday people like you.
It's a reminder that we're all part of this complex, ever-evolving system, and the more we understand it, the better equipped we are to navigate it.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought, something that Lester mentioned that really stuck with me. He talks about how this stimulus package could empower groups of Chinese citizens to pool their resources and invest internationally.
Ah, yes, the intriguing possibility of collective investment emerging from this individual stimulus.
Exactly. What if we see a surge in Chinese investment flowing into U.S. startups, real estate, or even crypto projects?
It's a scenario worth considering, and it highlights the potential for unexpected consequences, the kind that can disrupt industries and create new opportunities.
So here's the question I want you to ponder. If you were a Chinese citizen receiving a portion of this stimulus, what would you do with it? Would you invest it locally, or would you look for opportunities abroad? And if so, where would you turn your attention?
It's a thought experiment that can lead to some fascinating insights. And it reminds us that behind the abstract numbers and economic theories, there are real people making decisions that can shape the future.
So keep exploring, stay curious, and don't be afraid to challenge your assumptions. Because in a world as complex and interconnected as ours, the best way to stay ahead is to stay informed and to keep asking questions.
Until next time, keep diving deep. Makes you wonder what it means for the average person over there.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, like you said, it's not just market trends, it's real people whose lives are going to be impacted by this.
And that brings us back to something Lester touched on. I think it's worth digging into the specific mechanics of how this stimulus package is actually going to work. We know it's supposed to boost the economy.
Right.
But how?
Well, from what we've gathered so far, it seems like a big chunk of the stimulus is going towards infrastructure projects, particularly in rural areas.
Interesting.
Lester sees this as a strategic move to stimulate domestic demand, reduce China's reliance on exports. It's a way to try to create jobs and spur growth from within.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But couldn't that also be seen as a way to keep that money circulating internally?
It's possible. China has always been really good at balancing economic liberalization with, keeping a firm grip on the levers of power.
Yeah.
This stimulus package could be another example of that.
Right. Okay. So we've got these infrastructure projects potentially creating jobs, stimulating internal spending.
Right.
But Lester also mentioned real estate playing a key role.
Yeah.
How does that fit into all of this?
So it seems like there's a part of the stimulus that's designed to incentivize homeownership, particularly for younger generations. This could be an attempt to address that growing affordability crisis in China's major cities.
Oh, wow.
While simultaneously propping up the real estate market, which has been looking a little shaky lately.
Hold on. Wasn't China's real estate bubble a major concern a while back? Are they basically trying to reinflate it?
It's more nuanced than that. Remember, context is key. While there are definitely risks associated with any large-scale intervention in the real estate market, this could also be seen as an attempt to stabilize a really vital sector of the Chinese economy. It's all about finding that delicate balance between stimulus and stability.
So let's say these initiatives are successful.
Yeah.
The Chinese economy really starts humming along.
Okay.
How does that impact the global landscape? China's already a major player on the world stage.
Right.
But could this push them even further ahead?
That's the question everyone's asking, and it's got analysts around the world watching very closely. If China manages to successfully stimulate its domestic economy, it could lead to increased demand for commodities and raw materials, impacting prices globally. We could see a ripple effect across supply chains, affecting businesses and consumers worldwide.
Okay, so we're talking potential inflation on a global scale. But wouldn't a strong Chinese economy also mean more investment flowing outwards? Didn't Lester suggest that Chinese citizens might be looking to diversify their portfolios?
He did. And this is where things get really interesting for investors and entrepreneurs outside of China. If even a decent chunk of this stimulus money ends up in the hands of individuals who want to invest internationally, we could see a wave of capital flowing into foreign markets, including the U.S.
Whoa. Okay, I can already see the headlines. Chinese stimulus sparks global investment boom. But hold on. Wouldn't there be some risks too?
Oh, of course.
China's government has a history of intervening in markets and exerting control. Could that spill over into foreign investments?
It's a valid concern, and one that investors should definitely think about carefully. China's approach to economic influence can be quite different from what we're used to in the West. There's always a chance that political considerations could factor into investment decisions. And that adds a layer of complexity that can't be ignored.
So it's not just about the money. It's about understanding the motivations behind those investments.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where doing your homework becomes absolutely crucial. If you're thinking about seeking investment from Chinese sources, or if you're thinking about investing in companies with ties to China, it's really important to understand the political and economic landscape.
It sounds like navigating this new economic reality is going to require more than just financial savvy.
It's true.
We're going to need a deep understanding of geopolitics, cultural differences, and even the art of reading between the lines.
You got it. The global economy is becoming more and more interconnected.
Yeah.
And that means we can't just look at things through a purely financial lens anymore.
Right.
We need to think like global citizens, constantly trying to understand the bigger picture
The context.
in which these economic events are unfolding.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got infrastructure spending, real estate incentives, global ripple effects,
Right.
and the potential for increased Chinese investment abroad.
But there's still one piece of the puzzle we haven't fully explored.
And what's that?
Cryptocurrency. Lester hinted that this stimulus package could have major implications for digital assets.
Yeah.
But he kind of left us hanging.
Well, this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
And to be honest, a little unpredictable China has been a fascinating case study when it comes to crypto. They've cracked down hard on mining and trading within their borders.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they're actively developing their own central bank digital currency, the digital yuan.
Right. So how does this new stimulus package potentially impact that whole situation?
That's what everyone's wondering. It's got crypto enthusiasts and investors alike kind of on the edge of their seats. Here are a few scenarios to consider.
All right. Lay it on me.
First, the increased economic activity that the stimulus is supposed to bring about
Okay.
could lead to a surge in demand for cryptocurrencies
Okay.
as alternative investment options.
Interesting.
Bitcoin and other digital assets are often seen as hedges against inflation and economic uncertainty. So if the stimulus does cause prices to rise, Chinese citizens might turn to crypto as a way to protect their savings.
Interesting. So even with the crackdown on crypto within China, we could see a rise in demand driven by the stimulus itself. What else?
Another possibility is that the Chinese government might use this stimulus to push the adoption of the digital yuan even further.
Okay.
If the stimulus is distributed digitally,
Right.
it could incentivize people to use the digital yuan for their daily transactions,
Right.
potentially paving the way for wider adoption.
Okay. That makes sense. It's like using the stimulus to sneak their own digital currency into the mainstream. But wouldn't that contradict their crackdown on other cryptocurrencies?
Not necessarily. China has always been strategic about how they approach financial innovation. They might be comfortable with a controlled, centralized digital currency like the digital yuan,
Yeah.
while at the same time being cautious about the decentralized and potentially disruptive nature of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies.
So it's all about maintaining control even in the digital world.
Pretty much.
But how does this impact the global crypto market? Could China's actions even indirectly influence the price of Bitcoin and other digital assets?
Absolutely. China has been a huge player in the crypto world. And even though they've put restrictions in place, their actions still have the potential to create ripple effects throughout the market.
Go.
If we see more demand for crypto inside of China, even if it's for alternative assets like the digital yuan,
Right.
it could put upward pressure on prices globally.
Okay. So we're talking potential price fluctuations,
Yeah.
increased adoption of the digital yuan,
Yeah,
and maybe even a change in how the world sees cryptocurrency.
possibly.
This is getting complicated.
Welcome to global finance in the digital age. It's fascinating and constantly evolving.
For sure.
The lines between economics, technology, and geopolitics are becoming more and more blurred.
So for someone like me who's trying to keep up with all of this, what are the key takeaways when it comes to crypto and the Chinese stimulus?
I think the most important thing is to pay attention to how the stimulus is implemented and how the Chinese government talks about cryptocurrency in the context of this economic initiative.
Are there any specific signs we should look out for?
Definitely keep an eye out for any announcements or policy changes related to the digital yuan,
Okay.
and monitor what's happening in the Chinese crypto market. If you see any big shifts in either of those areas, it could signal bigger changes coming.
Okay. Eyes on the digital yuan and the Chinese crypto market.
Yeah.
Got it. But this whole thing feels like a giant puzzle with pieces that keep moving.
Sure.
How can we possibly make sense of it?
You're not wrong. It's a complex and constantly changing landscape.
Yeah.
But that's also what makes it so interesting. By staying informed, engaging in critical thinking,
Yeah.
and always looking for connections, we
Yeah.
can start to understand how these forces are shaping the future of global finance.
And hey, maybe we'll even be able to see some of those moves coming.
Wouldn't that be something? Even without a crystal ball, we can still learn a lot by analyzing the information we have and using a bit of creative thinking.
So we need to become economic detectives,
Yeah.
always looking for clues and putting the pieces together.
Exactly. And remember, in a world where everyone has access to so much information, the most valuable skill is knowing how to sort through it, analyze it, and understand what it all means. That's what sets a true deep diver apart.
Okay, I'm ready to put on my detective hat and get to work.
Mm.
But before we go too far down that rabbit hole,
Yeah.
let's bring it back to the listener. What's the one thing they should take away from this?
The biggest takeaway is that China's new economic stimulus package has the potential to change everything, not just for China,
Right.
but for the global economy. And the key to understanding it is to look beyond the headlines, to connect the dots, and to always be ready for the unexpected.
So stay vigilant, stay curious, and stay tuned for more deep dives as this story unfolds.
Absolutely. Because in the world of global economics, there's always a new adventure waiting.
It's amazing to think how much we've unpacked in this deep dive.
Yeah, we really went deep.
From the nuts and bolts of China's new stimulus package to the potential shock waves it could send across the globe.
Right.
And of course, we couldn't forget about that crypto wildcard.
Definitely a big one.
And throughout it all, we've stressed the importance of critical thinking.
Yeah, looking beyond those flashy headlines.
Right.
And recognizing just how interconnected our global economy truly is.
Absolutely. It's a powerful reminder that what happens in China doesn't stay in China.
Yeah.
It has ripple effects that can impact investors, entrepreneurs, and everyday folks like you and me.
Exactly. We're all part of this massive global system, whether we realize it or not. And the more we understand how it all works, the better equipped we are to navigate it.
You know, as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
I want to go back to something Lester mentioned that really got me thinking. He talked about the possibility of this stimulus empowering groups of Chinese citizens to pool their resources and invest internationally.
That's right. The idea of collective investment strategies emerging from these individual stimulus benefits.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating concept.
It is.
And it could have some major implications.
Definitely.
What if we see a flood of Chinese investment coming into U.S. startups, real estate, even crypto projects? How would that reshape the investment landscape as we know it?
It's a scenario we need to seriously consider. And it highlights the potential for things to play out in ways we might not expect.
Unexpected consequences.
Right, the kind that can disrupt industries, but also create all sorts of new opportunities.
So here's a question I want to leave our listeners with. If you were a Chinese citizen and you received a portion of the stimulus, where would you put your money? Would you keep it local, or would you look for opportunities overseas?
It's a thought-provoking question. It forces us to step into someone else's shoes and consider their perspective. And it reminds us that behind all these abstract economic theories and market movements, there are real people making real decisions that shape the world we live in.
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive. We explored the potential upsides and downsides of China's big economic move. We analyzed how it could shake up global markets, and we even took a plunge into the unpredictable world of crypto.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. And if there's one thing I hope our listeners take away from all of this, it's this. Stay informed, stay curious, and never be afraid to question your assumptions.
Couldn't have said it better myself. In a world as complex and interconnected as ours, that's how we stay ahead of the game. That's how we uncover new opportunities, and that's how we ride the waves of the global economy.
So keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into the forces that shape our world.
Until next time.
Happy diving, everyone!